children in Islam. Raising of children is a challenging but a rewarding task. By relying on Allah and following His guidance, parents can raise their children to be kind, compassionate, and Allah-fearing. Muslim parents should handle their children's stubbornness with wisdom, deliberation, and patience. Parents should show love and sincere desire for children's well-being, out of love and care for them, instead of using physical punishment like beating them up or verbal mistreatment like becoming angry, shouting and screaming. A better alternative is to use discipline as a form of punishment which is fair but firm. This includes time out, loss of privileges, or other consequences that are appropriate for the child's age and behavior. So it's very important that we should rely on Almighty Allah in raising our children. Because in raising children in general, it requires great help from Almighty Allah. As there is an old saying, parents' job is to discipline the child, but righteousness comes from none but Almighty Allah. So this is an important principle in raising children. Many parents think that they are able to discipline their children with educational skills, smartness and intelligence that they have. Many affluent parents, rich parents, think that by putting the children into the best schools, educating them in the most prestigious institution, and letting them mix with upper class children, that they will be able to manage them and discipline them and control their behavior. This usually turns out to be a very big mistake. Yes, parents are required to take all available measures that will help to discipline the child and give them good education. But unfortunately, the problem arises when parents themselves are far away from Almighty Allah and only rely on these measures by way of trusting them, relying on them, and thinking that whatever they do is sufficient and effective. If Almighty Allah leaves a person to his own devices, that person will go astray. And if He, Allah Azza wa Jalla, leaves him to rely on his own knowledge, with the person's own knowledge, he will be humiliated. In the Holy Quran, Almighty Allah mentioned about the son of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam. He, being the messenger of Allah, could do nothing for his son to the extent that his son ended up amongst the disbelievers. When Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam spoke to Almighty Allah and cried to him, this is in Surah Hud, verse 45 translation, O my Lord, indeed my son is of my family, and indeed your promise is true, and you are the most just of judges. Almighty Allah replied to him, responded, and this is also the next verse in Surah Hud, verse 46. So Almighty Allah tells to Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, O Nuh, indeed he is not your family. Indeed he is one of those whose work is other than righteous. So ask me not for that about which you have no knowledge. Indeed, I advise you, let him be amongst the ignorant. Hence, the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which he offered every day, morning and evening, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith. The translation, the full dua is, O ever living, O self-sustaining, O by your mercy I seek your help. Rectify all my affairs and do not leave me to my own devices, even for the blink of an eye. I mean, this was the dua of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where although he was the greatest of the creation of Almighty Allah, most beloved, He Himself said, that do not leave me to my own devices, even for the blink of an eye. That means Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made this dua for us to learn this dua because we need guidance all the time. Reflecting on this important matter, of which many parents today are heedless, we should not rely on ourselves with regards to raising our children. We should not rely on our smartness nor our knowledge. Rather, we should rely on the strongest support, which is none other than the support from the one who can help us, the Lord of all the worlds, the most gracious and the most merciful, Allah Azza wa Jalla. For He alone is the one that controls people's hearts and directs them, and the people's forelocks are in His hand, and He will guide them, and if it is His will, He will guide them, but if He lets them go astray, then no one can guide them. Glory be to Allah, how mighty and wise and all-knowing and kind in all the way He is. One of the main measures to be taken when regarding children who are stubborn is to handle them with wisdom, deliberation and patience. This is because responding to stubbornness with stubbornness only leads to even more stubbornness. Remember, you are an adult and you're dealing with children who are not as mature as you. So you cannot, if they are stubborn, stoop to their level and become stubborn as well. So we have to use wisdom in bringing them into the correct fold. In this case, the matter should not end up like a tug of war. The more one side pulls, the more motivated the other side becomes to pull even harder. But if the mother lets go or the father lets go to the one end of the rope when dealing with the child, it stops him to become confrontational. And the child will have no reason to continue being stubborn, and he will go back to his normal state of weakness and will refrain from doing any more mischief. So this is very, very wise. So we should not become stubborn like the child. We should let go. And you find that in a short space of time, the child will return to his normal self. But if we become stubborn, then he will respond as well. A stubborn child is usually very smart and will always resort to tricks because he wants to do what he plans to do stubbornly. In most cases, such a child feels oppressed by the people around him, his siblings, his relatives, his parents, grandparents, because they criticize him and they treat him harshly and makes him feel resentful. This is what happens in most cases. And also you find, even Amir Rasul, the founder of Dawat Islam, he mentioned once on Madani channel, that people will come to him, bringing the child, and say openly to him that this child is not reading Salah, this child is not reading, this child is that, and criticize the child. And he said, how silly they are. This child respects and loves me, and you are degrading him in front of me. You think he will have any trust and love for the father, for disgracing him in front of a personality like Amir Rasul, founder of Dawat Islam? So he advises as well, don't be foolish. Don't go to anybody else in the family and say, my son is like this, give him advice. You as a parent should hide his fault and explain to him, not expose his fault to others. And this is what we do. And the grandfather comes, we talk to the grandfather, he's doing this and he's doing that, and try and degrade in front of the grandparents or anybody in the family that's got respect. So you are actually humiliating him in front of people that he cares for. So what happens? You are destroying his relationship with that person. Because if the grandfather turns to scold him and discipline him, then the love for the grandparents will also reduce in his heart. So this is something very important for us, that we should learn how to discipline our children. That means, in most cases, as we find, that because of these things, that the person becomes alienated from society. And then as the child grows up, you find that he develops an urge to take revenge on human society. And this initially will come in the form of stubbornness in the child. And as he grows, he becomes violent in nature, and then you find he grow up against social norms. Therefore, what you must do in this situation is respond to his tricks and whatever he's doing by ignoring him and tolerating what he's doing. You must not respond to a child's feeling of being oppressed, but you must try and show him compassion and make him understand. That means spend time to understand why he's going through this and explain to him. You must not respond to the rebellious behavior and stubbornness, but you must shower him with love, and you must be sincere in your desire to correct him. And you must show him that you love him and you care and you want to discipline him, but with love and care. At the same time, you must be firm, because where discipline is required, you must discipline, but without beating up the child. You can withhold certain privileges from him. Like you can tell him that you're not going to go and play outside because of this. You come right, then I'll allow you to go out, etc. So even you find that none of the Islamic scholars recommend that you must beat your child up. And even when they talk about beating a child, it mentions that you must not use anything that can harm the child. They say use a branch of the child, and this is also recommended, a small branch, and you must not even lift your hand very high, maybe shoulder hand, just to almost like touch him, not to beat him and break his bones. What happens with us when we lose our temper? We don't see what we are doing. We beat the child up, and that's just a child. And the child has no understanding, and we expect the child to understand like how we have understanding. So we just lose it, and we use anything. Sometimes you find parents take anything and throw it on the child, and after the child is hurt, then you have to rush the child to the hospital, and you are the cause of it. And people do this. They lose the temper, and what actually instigates the temper is shaitan. Because shaitan and our nafs, which is controlled by shaitan, he does not want harmony in your home. He wants to control your child. He wants you to lose your temper. He wants you to do things that will make the child angry with you. He will make you do things that the child will start not loving you, not respecting you, where you can't discipline him. Then he takes over disciplining your child according to his evil behavior. So who is the architect of that? We as parents. Where we lose our temper. And as I said, you are dealing with a child who is not as mature as you. So you should think about everything before losing your temper. Because he is a child. Children lose their temper easily. Because sometimes even a 2 or 3 year old child, he doesn't understand what he does. He may break something that is valuable to you, but he didn't do it deliberately. He doesn't know. And you become so angry that because of him damaging something, you damage him. And then you have to spend, maybe you damage him so badly he has to end up in hospital. Then you become regretful. So therefore it's very important that we must always be calm when we're dealing with our children. Don't lose your temper. And it also mentioned that we should always try to show kindness to the child when dealing with it, whenever the situation is negative. And thus we find that if you show kindness, eventually you find that you'll be able to discipline him properly, and he will not become among those who will become, as I say in the future, someone that will be hard to control. And there are certain things like, imagine if he's careless. So you don't tell him, no, you are careless. You must tell him this way. You are organized, but sometimes you have to become careless. So you always do the positive first. Like if he's lying, you must say, listen, I know you're always honest, but see, now you have lied. So you mustn't do that. So you always do the positive first and build him up. Instead of describing him as violent, say he hit his brother or his sister. So normally you're so compassionate. What happened to you? Why you hit your brother? So don't say, why you hit your brother, and you will slap him. So you always do the positive. This is what the scholars say, and so on. So you bring the positive first and describe the thing, you're always good, you're always kind, you're always this compassionate. So what is meant by physical mistreatment? That means if you humiliate him, or if you use physical aggression against him, if you cause pain because you want to take revenge, that means like beating up the child, and this goes beyond as a Islamic requirement. Because Islamic teaching does not allow you to hit the child to such a level that he is in pain. That means you want to take revenge and cause pain to him. And this is, as I said, not according to Islamic teaching. And also it mentioned that you should not strike a child on his face, on his private parts, or any exposed part of his body. And as we mentioned, that you shouldn't strike in such a way that he can be harmed. Okay, and as we mentioned, the striking also is mentioned that it should be for the purpose of discipline and it should not be severe. That you must always remember. In Sahih Muslim, it is mentioned of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Fear Allah," and here we're talking about teaching good manners. With regards to women, for you have taken them as a trust from Allah, and the intimacy with them has become permissible to you by the word of Allah. Your rights for them are that you should not allow anyone whom you dislike to sit on your furniture, and do not strike them in such a manner that it causes pain. So yeah, even for the mother, because you find many people don't care. They will hit the spouses in front of the children when they're angry. So you are teaching the children by your action that if you angry, you use violence. You find many people, many psychologists have mentioned this, where you find people who beat up their wives, and you go and look at history, they say, no, our father used to beat our mother. So we took it as normal. So when we are angry with our wives, we beat our wives. So it is a cycle of action that doesn't cease. Because when they beat their wives, their children also see this. It becomes a vicious cycle. So we have to learn that using your physical forces against females, because they are the weaker force, and your children, is not acceptable in Islam. And again, it mentioned that Hazrat Atta mentioned, I asked Hazrat Ibn Abbas, what is meant by striking that does not cause pain? He said, hitting with like a miswak. He mentioned lightly, not to cause harm. The acceptable alternative to physical and verbal punishment is by depriving the child of certain things. So what is meant by depriving is something that he loves. You tell him that until he disciplines himself, he will not be able to. Until he disciplines himself, he will not have this privilege as well. Like sometimes you can you give them time out, or you can make them sit. You have a chair, a naughty chair in your home. Physical things for children. Just a few points of the time is not permitted to go into detail. This is a very important topic because, as you can see, we find many people complaining that they give the children whatever they want, good education, all these kind of things. But as the child grows up, they find that the child is becoming disobedient to them, not listening to them. And as I said, the biggest problem is the discipline, but they don't bring them close to Almighty Allah. So if you become close to Almighty Allah, the child learns about respect for parents. But this is what Almighty Allah commands in the Holy Quran. That as your parents become old, do not even say oof to them. So it teaches them. So if you are far away from Almighty Allah, how do you expect your children to be close to Almighty Allah? So if they are not close to Almighty Allah, how will they know what is the Islamic requirement of respect of parents? Because that's the discipline that Islam teaches everyone. Respect for your parents, especially when they get old. And look at how foolish we are. We don't teach our children about Islam. You find this is very common these days. Even in Muslim countries. Now you have old age homes where you fed up with your parents, you put them in the old age home and forget about them. Is this what you want for yourself when you grow up? Because if you do not teach your children Islam, this is what's going to happen to you. And there are many people, even in Muslim countries, where old people were interviewed and they wait for certain days, like Eid day or something, for the family to come and visit them. And one old parent complained that even once or twice a year when the children, the grandchildren come to visit, they will just hug the grandparent. And one person actually took out a video of a family that came to visit this old person in the old age home. And they show you that after meeting no one is talking to this old person. Each one is occupied with his cell phone and social media. Even the son, the daughter-in-law, the grandchildren, and you see the old lady looking at everyone, nobody even talking to her. So what kind of visit is this? Now this can happen to us. If we don't teach our children about Islam, if we ourselves keep ourselves away from the closeness to Almighty Allah, how can you put fear of children, fear of Allah in their hearts, when you yourself are far away from Almighty Allah? Because they learn from your example. So if we want our children to love Allah, we must show love to Allah. We must show obedience to Allah. We must show that we are dedicated to Almighty Allah by being obedient servants, by performing our salah. I mention this all the time. If you do not perform your salah and your children observe this and they think it's not important to obey Allah because my father does not obey Allah, my mother does not obey Allah, so why should I obey Allah? As you can see, this is whatever we are the architect of the destruction of the morality of our own children. So may Almighty Allah give us tawfiq to understand this message and act upon it. Ameen bi jahi nabi Ameen. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.